Oh, yeah.
Hello, my cat loving friends. This is Linda Hall, co-host of 19 Cats and Counting. Today's guest is most recognized by who he's married to, but he's quite accomplished on his own. He's a retired management consultant. He helped businesses with planning, finance, and operations, and has had quite an impressive career. He even co-founded a business and managed it while managing two others. In 2002, he was at an animal advocacy event, points for him, where he met a lovely lady that they married in 2004. That lady would be Carole Baskin. So we have Howard Baskin here today. We want to talk about everything they went through to pass this act. We want to talk about those big old kitties and a million other questions. So we will be right back after this word from our sponsor. Welcome back to 19 Cats and Counting. I am your co-host, Linda Hall, here with my ever lovely, beautiful blonde BFF, Rita Reimers.
I know this doesn't happen to you, but I'm speechless. I really am so excited to talk with Howard.
I know.
So let's just get right to it.
I am too. Yes. Howard, thank you so much for coming on and being with us today.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
It's our honor.
Do you have any guess when you met that lovely lady at an animal advocacy event in 2004 that all of this would happen?
No, in fact, a few years later, as I got, a few years under my belt at the sanctuary, one of my friends said, you've been involved in a bunch of different things, but nothing this different.
This was different. I don't think anybody's done anything that different, or the list is small.
I changed your career. I mean, I've owned two businesses now, so I know how hard it can be, but to be juggling multiple businesses at once and then take this total turn. Wow, that's a lot.
Yes. So tell us about the Big Cat Sanctuary and its purpose first.
Well, the Big Cat Rescue is a sanctuary for exclusively exotic big cats, and that ranges from little bobcats and servals, some of the smaller cats that people have never heard of, like caracals, up to the tigers. I mean, we have had lions in the past, not right now, and some of the hybrids, which is a whole nother evil industry. So, we make a commitment to lifetime care for these animals. We have 41 of them now, and the species that we currently have are tigers, a jaguar, bobcats, caracals, servals, and there are a lot of places that have sanctuary in the name or call themselves sanctuary that we refer to as pseudo sanctuaries. They're really not. And the easy way to tell, in my opinion, is if they do not do any of what I call the 5 sins, then they qualify as a sanctuary. And those,
what are those sins?
Funny you should ask. Basically, that's buy animals, sell animals, breed animals, take the animals off site to exhibit them, which is always stressful, or let people touch them in the case of exotic animals.
Yes.
And if they don't do those things and give good animal care, then they qualify, in my view, as a sanctuary. And for viewers who are, we often get a question about this place or that place. The best resource is the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, or GFAS, GFAS. And if they're accredited by GFAS, that's basically the gold standard for sanctuaries in terms of the requirements, and there are inspections, serious inspections. And so that's basically what we do, but we go way beyond that. We've always framed our mission in 3 parts. One is to take care of the cats, the best care we can give them. One is the advocacy part, the trying to stop the abuse, which is where the federal bill is playing a huge role. And then the third is to try to stop the extinction in the wild. And we sort of, it's a little bit like tithing. We take about $100,000 of our revenue each year and fund projects in the wild. Many of them, for instance, trying to deal with the human predator conflict. So if you're in an area where the cat predators would take the livestock, chickens or goats, then the tendency, if these people depend on these animals for their living, so the tendency is to do a revenge killing if their animals are killed. So funding building bomas that protect them, or what are called predator-proof chicken coops, things like that, are some of the things we do in that arena.
Awesome. That is amazing. So what is the harm in me going up and petting a lion, other than the fact that he'd eat me? But if I were in a safe position,
Or
what
handling
is
the
the harm
babies,
in
which
us
was popular
petting
for a
big-
while.
Yes, yeah.
Well,
What's wrong with that?
The big issue has been the cub petting, where here's this adorable cub. It's very appealing, and people just don't know what goes on behind the scenes. So it's just a matter of not being aware. So we don't blame people who do that. You can see the appeal. Before I got involved in this, I wouldn't have known any better.
Right.
But
Me too.
what happens at these places, they can only use the cubs for a few months. So these places like Doc Antle, or what Joe Exotic and Jeff Lowe used to have, will have 50 to 100 tigers, adult tigers, in what they call breeding pairs in small enclosures. And with the females, what they do is called speed breeding, where they will try to get them pregnant as soon as possible after birth. Well, this is not natural. In the wild, these animals would breed every couple of years. They would breed and raise their cubs, teach them to hunt. They would then go off and get their own territories, and then they would breed again. And this speed breeding, aside from just a miserable life for these animals, is also believed to cause mammary cancer. We had 2 of our female tigers who were used this way die from mammary cancer.
Right.
And the cubs themselves, I mean, imagine in any mammal species, the cub being taken away from its mother. This is a torment to the mother and the cub right there. But they do that so that the cub will bond to people and be what they refer to as more manageable. The mother's, the bottled milk, the formula, does not have the kind of antibodies that protect them from disease that the mother's milk has. There's no tracking of how many of them die along the way. And then they are often deprived of food to make them hungry for the bottle. And you'll see these places where they were holding them with the bottle to keep them distracted, because, think about your domestic kittens. When they're awake, do they just want to sit there?
Yes, just like little angel. No,
they want to romp and play. And, we see behavior issues from our domestic cats that were taken from their mom too young. We got a lot of behavior calls about that.
Well, the tiger cubs are no different. And so what they want to do is run around, use their claws and their teeth, and they're physically punished to try to diminish those behaviors. I mean, literally beaten. And then 3-4 months later, when they're too big for this, there's no tracking of what happens to them. Many of them end up in somebody's backyard. They get this cub,
or worse.
It's manageable for a few months, and then it's not. And it ends up, the conditions, when we've done these rescues at private homes, the conditions these animals live in are just awful. So, when you go pay to do cub petting, you're supporting that industry. You're creating a market. If there's no market, it stops. Look what happened to Ringling.
Yes.
As people became more and more aware that that's not what I want my children to learn about how animals should be treated.
Yes.
The attendance dropped, and they ended up closing. Well, now in our case, now the cub petting, at least with the larger cats, is stopped by our federal bill, and it's been very effective. We've been monitoring.
Yeah, and even when I was a kid, I'm sorry, Linda, even when I was a kid, I never liked the idea of going to the circus, and I've never been to one because I know those animals weren't treated well.
I hate to admit it, but I went. I loved it. It never clicked with me. I am zoo.
Well, you didn't know. You were a kid, right?
Yeah, I didn't know. But yeah, I did, I would have probably even 10, 15 years ago petted a cub if somebody had have offered it to me. I see those animals and I would love nothing more than to just get in there and play with. I know better now, but
if any good came from Joe Exotic, it was that we've all been educated.
For sure. Yes. Yeah, I suppose when you blow something up like that, at least tells people. But tell us about what you had to go through to get, that's a pretty large list, y'all went through what, death threats and hitmen and
The
trips
Big
back and
Cat
forth to
Safety Act we're talking
Washington
about.
and you filing this, which becomes this, which becomes this. What all was involved in getting the Big Cat Safety Act passed?
Well, you just asked for our life story. For
Exactly.
Well, we could make this into 2 segments.
I know, right?
It's not one question.
Yes.
Uh,
I just don't
well,
think that
you know,
people listening realize what a huge mountain that is you climbed and what all
I
you
think
went
they
through.
have several mountains.
Yeah.
well, look, the battle with Joe Exotic started in the first really 10 years that or at least 8 years that I was here. My job was not the advocacy. I was trying to get the sanctuary into a financial position where we could do advocacy. And it wasn't until, and so Carole, to the extent she could, would go after these people. And she realized at one point that all these various places that were going around to these malls doing cub petting and had different names, she realized one day she looked, she said, wait a minute, that's the same equipment or the same person that I saw over here under a different name. And Joe had all these different names to hide his bad history. And as she
Don't shoot that, honey.
continued after him, he decided the way to get us back was he would rename his traveling show Big Cat Rescue Entertainment.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, we use a slightly modified version of our logo. So, you know, that's when I got involved and we started very seriously going after him. And we started getting these malls to cancel one by one or say they won't have him back. And so that's what led to all that. And then, Joe made 2 mistakes that nobody reports about. Nobody in the media has said anything about this. And Joe never takes the blame for anything.
Oh, of
So,
course
Of course
not.
not. Of course not.
right? I meant to. But when we sued him, I mean, once he started using our name and we started getting calls saying, hey, I'm here in Texas. I thought you guys didn't do this kind of thing. So it was working. You know, he was, and he stupidly went online and admitted that he took out the name to damage our reputation. So there was no point. You know, normally you would send a cease and desist letter first. There was obviously no point with Joe in doing that. So, but when we filed the federal suit, I thought he would be smart enough to say, wait a minute, you know what? I don't want the expense of a federal lawsuit, but not Joe. And he filed these counterclaims that were ridiculous. And so that was his first mistake. His other mistake that nobody talks about was I went out there in 2015. The federal court process has a mandatory mediation. And we went through, and I won't take you through all the details, but we went through 12 hours of mediation where I was willing to work with him.
Sure.
And that we reached an agreement that he would stop doing the cub petting, but continue to run his zoo. And we shook hands. The attorneys, you know, write out a term sheet with the terms. Everybody signs off on it. And then when Jeff Lowe came along that week and said, no, don't do that. I'll pay for the attorneys, which he never did. Joe backed out of the deal. If he had done that deal, he'd still be running a zoo.
Sure.
Or years before, if he just stopped using our name, he'd still be running a zoo. So people don't understand that. So fast forward to, I may get the years mixed up now, they kind of blend together, but I think November 2018, and I'm sitting at my desk and imagine the phone rings, I pick it up, and I knew this person a little bit from the Fish and Wildlife Service, Matt Bryant, because I had once or twice had an email with him about something, reporting something or asking a question. So the voice says, this is Matt Bryant with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and I'm here with so-and-so from the FBI. And my first reaction was, what did I do? You know?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not every day the FBI comes knocking at your door.
Yeah, it's like, okay.
Well, you know, there's been hitmen. We've had helicopters flying over. I don't think this is out of the normal view for you all's life at this point, is it?
Sadly.
Well, but this was the start of the hitman because what they said to me was, look, we don't want to alarm you, but we want you to be aware that Joe is actively trying to hire someone to kill Carole. And We want you to be on the alert. We'd like you to talk to an FBI person there for some advice. So we had some years before gone to get our concealed weapons license, which you need to carry in Florida.
Right.
And so, we started carrying guns in the car. And you know how when you watch the movies and someone's driving and they're looking to see if they're being followed? Well, when we were driving, we'd be looking at who's around us. If we pulled into a
my goodness.
we'd be looking around the parking spot. When Carole, and because Carole was already fairly well known locally, and we would be wearing our logo, it was not unusual for her, if she was going into the supermarket or getting gas, for someone to come up and say, "Oh, I love your place. I've been there. My kids have been there." Well, she'd be pumping gas, see somebody approaching, and now be wondering, do I have to take the gas and douse this person?
Oh my God.
This could be the hitman. So we went through that for like 9 months until they finally arrested him. So that's that part of the story.
What did he think he was going to buy? What did he think he was going to get? I mean, obviously, if he'd done that, he'd be in jail like he is. He wasn't going to get anything out of it. He's just crazy.
Well, think about in his mind, people like that don't think they're going to get caught.
It's true.
So he thought that would end the lawsuit.
I cannot imagine living 9 months like that. I wouldn't leave the house. I'm going to give you both props for the fact that she even went to the gas station, because I don't think I'd leave my house. I think I would be crippled with fear for 9 months. And the fear you must have had. Did you let her out of your sight? Was she allowed to venture off alone? Because I'd have been like, no, you ain't leaving without me.
Trying to control or even influence Carole is a little like herding cats. So
understand.
My husband would say the same about me. I'm just kind of hanging my head here. I got you.
The one thing she did, which gave me some comfort, was for a period of time she stopped riding her bicycle to and from. There was this whole evidence of, and she's very exposed. She rides through a wooded area on a trail.
Yeah. Well, how horrible that you have to change your lifestyle because somebody else is an idiot.
Yeah. So that's kind of that story, and then when Jeff Lowe took over, we continued the lawsuits against him, and eventually we were able to throw him off the property, and that's what got the animals away from him, because he had to move them to a place. Jeff Lowe always would talk about these grandiose plans, and he's like this brilliant businessman. And he had set up this place and bought these little prefab wire boxes to put the tigers in.
Oh my goodness.
So he was not ever going to be ready to move there, but he certainly wasn't ready when we got the court to evict him. And so moving them there, the conditions were so bad that the USDA and the Department of Justice went after him, and they ended up taking all the animals. So that was a very good ending to that.
Definitely.
Is that when you started working on the Big Cats Safety Act during all of this?
Well, Carole had worked on federal legislation back in the late 90s and helped get a bill called the Captive Wildlife Safety Act passed in 2003. And it had some effect, but it was limited and had big loopholes, and it didn't stop the cub petting, and it didn't stop these people having them in their backyard.
Sure.
Right.
So in 2011, we ended up going to DC and meeting with the much larger, what are called NGOs, basically nonprofits, non-governmental organizations that do federal legislation, and that would be HSUS, Born Free, IFAW, initials that are probably familiar to much people.
Yes.
ALDF, people like that.
Yes.
And it was a wonderful meeting where we all agreed to work on this, quote, big cat problem together. And we had a 3-pronged strategy. Right. One was a petition to USDA about the cub petting, which they're still sitting on a decade or so later. The other one, which was very successful, was changing what was called the generic tiger rule, where that was established by the Fish and Wildlife Service in 1998. And basically at that time, they said these mutt tigers, these ones that are of mixed subspecies, don't have to go through the normal process that an endangered species has to go through
Mhm.
in order to sell them. Well, that's what allowed Joe and Doc Antle and these people to just swap these animals back and forth. And that's part of that change, which we got changed in 2016. That's part of why Joe's in jail, because what he
Oh,
had previously done that was not illegal became illegal. And he was
yes.
still doing it. So a number of the counts that he was convicted of are related to that. And then I lost my train of thought.
Ugh.
Um,
So that
the
act,
three-prong strategy.
yeah.
The third prong was the federal bill. So this iteration of the federal bill, there were a couple between 2003 and this, but this iteration started then, and then we introduced it first in March of 2012. And it's the normal process. Very few bills pass the first time.
Right.
Right.
Congress is in 2-year sessions, and the session ends in the even year. It was introduced way at the end of that first session, mostly to get it going.
Just to
gotcha.
start it.
And then the process is first you need to find sponsors to introduce the bill.
Mhm.
And ideally you want a Republican and a Democrat, so it's bipartisan.
Right.
You try to get what are called initial co-sponsors who sign up in advance and are put in there right away at the beginning. And then you spend your time running around to all these offices trying to get them to sign onto the bill, which is called co-sponsoring. And it basically means if it comes to the floor, they say they're going to vote for it. And when you get, like in the House where there's 435 members, when you get over 200 co-sponsors, you start to have credibility. So each session we built more and more co-sponsors. And then along the way, we started to hire lobbyists. And so in 2012, the Republican convention was here. And through another one of those, there are no coincidences.
Yeah.
The fellow who was the director of external relations, the head PR guy, asked the manager of one of the business clubs, what should I do with my children while I'm here? And I knew Tim, and he said, oh, you got to take them to Big Cat Rescue. And so I gave this fellow a tour, and he was, you can tell when people are engaged.
Yes.
This is a guy who used to represent the NRA, okay? And as we were going around and I'm telling him the stories of the cats, he's shaking his head saying, this should not be.
True.
So I said, may I keep in touch with you? And in 2014, when I thought we might have enough money, I didn't know, to hire him, we worked out a deal and he cut his rate substantially for us.
Nice.
And so he started lobbying for us, particularly on the Republican side. You don't get to be the director of external relations for the Republican convention without knowing people.
No,
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
say.
You found someone in a really good position. And all of this is just years in the making, and all of these steps and so much time in Washington. When you're talking about being at these offices, these aren't in Florida, right? These are offices.
It's sad that
Washington
people
travel.
can't tour anymore, because if they could, they would learn so much probably
I
from the
know.
person giving the tour.
We need to stop for a break. Let's pick up on that and finish what we got to do to get to our bill in a moment. You want to cut us to our break?
Yep. We'll be right back after this word from our awesome sponsor. And we're back with 19 Cats and Counting. Linda and I are honored to be talking with Howard Baskin. We're in the middle of talking about how the Big Cat Safety Act came to be.
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to fast forward now.
Okay.
A couple of sessions. Here we are building support gradually over the sessions. And you learn so much. We were so naive when we started, and we're certainly not experts now, but the chairman of a committee has so much power. If the chairman doesn't like your bill, it doesn't go anywhere. And we ran into that in some Congresses. We entered the 2021 session, this just finished session, in much better shape than ever before for a couple of reasons. First, we had managed to get the bill through the House in December of 2020. So now the bill still, it doesn't pass, so it dies, you start over again. But so we start 2021 in the House saying, look, it passed in 2020. So we start working on it. It still took until July 2022 to get it through the House. It is just a painful process, but we got there, and now we had 5 months to get it through the Senate.
Mhm.
We also, at the end of 2020, we had always had, since 2016, we had the endorsement of the National Sheriff's Association, which we got by attending their conferences and getting to know them and getting it in front of them. And so I won't tell you, we don't have time for the full story, but the end of the story was that we worked out an arrangement where their senior lobbyist would work with us and add him to our team. And then we also had a few other people, among them, in one session, Jeff Denham, a Republican from California, was our lead Republican. He then didn't get reelected, but he joined our team this session. And and there's a fellow named Marty Irby, and then you may know the name Wade and Pacelli. They are all part of that organization. So they worked with us. At the same time, the other organizations were doing their lobbying. HSUS is very effective and really the biggest in terms of effectiveness in that. And a couple of the others that I mentioned earlier. So, but this was more the group that was working more the Republican side.
Mm-hmm.
In addition, in the 2019-20 session, for the first time in the Senate, we got a couple of Republicans to at least co-sponsor. We couldn't get one to lead, but co-sponsor. Well, then one of those, Senator Collins, agreed to be the co-lead in 2021. Well, that makes a huge difference because you're introducing the bill on a bipartisan basis.
Yes.
Now, the senior person of the minority party on a committee is called the ranking member. So you have the chairman and then the ranking member.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important to have the support of the ranking member, because if you don't, it becomes a very partisan vote in the committee.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not ideal. That's not the best way to get it to the floor for a vote. And we got information that Senator Capito from West Virginia was not opposed to the bill, but she wanted one of her Republican colleagues on the committee to be what's called the bill champion. And so we were working on that. But in the Senate, there's another process that the official name is unanimous consent. The nickname is hotline.
Okay.
And the way that works is there's a group of staff who do this, and you have to get the agreement of the two senior people on the committee and the leadership above them to even do a hotline, because if you only want to, they only want to do it if it's either going to go through or you're only going to get a little bit of opposition that you can work on.
They want a sure bet.
They send an email to all 100 offices saying, if you have a problem with this bill, let us know. And if everybody is quiet, the bill proceeds on.
Nice.
This is like a Hail Mary pass, okay? Because there are a number of senators who are known for putting what's called a hold on the hotline bills, even just automatically. Now, sometimes the hold just means, well, we haven't studied this bill. Hold on, give us
Need a minute.
Right.
So the odds of that happening seemed pretty low, but through Senator Collins and Senator Blumenthal's offices, they managed to get the hotline issued. We're sitting there, fingers crossed. We get 3 holds, and 2 of them we got released within a couple of weeks. We went and said, you go and say, okay, what are your concerns? And either show them that they don't have to be concerned about that, or try to do something to assuage that concern.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one, Senator Lankford from Oklahoma, which you would think, Oklahoma, I mean, that's Joe Exotic. Shouldn't the senator from Oklahoma be on board from the beginning? But look, he had what in his mind was an issue. And week after week, as the clock is ticking and we're running out of time, Senator Blumenthal's staff and we were doing everything we could to urge that he release his hold. And finally, he did. And so the bill passed. So that's kind of the Cliff Notes version.
I know the bill passed and I was
Right at the
holding my
end,
breath.
December.
But I was holding my breath. And every time you'd say that it was dead or that then you had to convince somebody else, I just felt this frustration that I can't even imagine what you two were going through. Was there Xanax involved? Because I cannot handle what I'm just
that last
walking through it.
I say there were a lot of sleepless nights, I bet.
Well, there were. And that last 6 months, the way I describe it, it's like the last 5 minutes of a tied Super Bowl game stretched out over 6 months. Because every step along the way, can we get the hotline? Could we get one of the senators on the committee? And we'd be told, well, after my primary, I'll look at it. Or and the lobbyists, these senior lobbyists, they get to know the congressmen and some of their chiefs of staff, personally. That doesn't mean they do what they ask, but it means they get an audience, they get heard.
Sure.
And so as opposed to the conversation only being at the legislative assistant level, you get this conversation up and down the ladder. So it was just enormously stressful. And when it passed, even today, if a couple months later, if I just sit here and say the bill passed, it's like my transcendental meditation. What did they call the word that you used to have? Your mantra?
Yes.
The mantra.
That's I would. How do you release something like that? I know it's like after having an accident or something, and you're keyed up for hours, and you're like, that's usually when my husband's going, your mother was fine. She was fine. Remember, she walked out of the accident. Something like this that went on for that many years. Crazy.
Well, and it encompassed your life. All of a sudden you probably were like, okay, now I have all this free time. What do I do with it?
Well, and look, it obviously wasn't only us. There were these other organizations working very hard. I think we played a very important kind of lead role in it.
Sure.
But
I don't think it would have happened without you.
No.
But yes, we have to acknowledge that it probably wouldn't have happened without all the support that you got either. But y'all worked your butts off. I can't even imagine. I grew up back in those. What were those little cartoons that educated you? And it was just, I'm just a bill. Yes,
I remember
bill, and I'm sitting here in Capitol Hill. Yeah, that sounded frustrating. But they didn't cover half of this. They didn't talk about getting people on your side. And
we watched Richard Simmons. We watched him get the Fit Kids bill passed, but he didn't go through near what you guys did.
That was a struggle and took a long time, but that wasn't anything like this. Which is kind of a sad commentary, because as important as a Fit Kids bill is,
I know,
there were animals being abused. Priorities, people, priorities. Is there not a way to like they do in hospitals where they prioritize the
triage?
The triage. That's my word. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. The gushing wounds come in before the fracture. Who comes in before the sprain? I think that we need to work that in.
Well, you all should be very, very proud, because a lot of big cats are having lives they wouldn't have had if this bill hadn't been passed.
Well, the impact. We can only take a handful of animals at the sanctuary. This will impact thousands of animals who will not be born into this cub petting trade and not be put, what we talked about earlier, in the show. So it's for us, basically, we kind of view it as our life's legacy.
Oh,
really
definitely.
Really opened my eyes when I watched that series, Joe versus Carole.
On
That's
Peacock.
when I watched it, and I called Linda. I'm like, you've got to watch this. I freaking love Carole and Howard Baskin after watching this, because I didn't know a lot.
What she said. That is exactly what she said. I love them. I love them so much. You have to watch this. Everything you've heard, put it away and watch this show.
This week I had to go into the hospital for a very minor thing, and when I got in there, one of the nurses said, "We thought Kyle MacLachlan was coming."
Exactly. If only you could get your actor to stand in for you for certain procedures.
Right?
Let him do the colonoscopy prep, there are things.
Yes, please, doesn't work
So-
that way, unfortunately.
Carole versus Joe, I know it's not dead on, but you approve of it overall, yes?
Yes, the
Okay.
first time we watched it, it was odd. First of all, we had become accustomed to seeing ourselves on screen after
Sure.
the conservation game and working with Louis Theroux on. If you haven't seen it, also on Peacock, his film "Shooting Joe Exotic" is very good because
He's the one that
he had
Write that
spent
down, Linda. We got to watch
I
that.
am.
But so
Yes.
it was very weird seeing famous actors play us. But also, when they announced it, were promoting it, they said it was based on Robert Moore's podcast.
Mhm.
And Robert Moore did a very good job of being very factual.
Good.
And so
Excuse me.
we expected it to be. But what we later learned, and also from another source of working with one of the cable companies on something, that they have to do, or they choose to do, in some cases have to do, what they call fictionalizing. So they would
Yeah.
take facts, but then kind of write a story that isn't quite what happened, but it gets the idea, the
I
concept.
gotcha.
So there was a lot of that,
That's gotta be frustrating. Be like, I didn't do that. That's not what I did.
I
That's
didn't
not what
say
he
that.
said. That would be tough.
But they really portrayed the love story between you and Carole, and I fell in love with your relationship.
He did.
Well, and that's what I mean. The first time we watched it, they would be doing the scene in the aquarium, and well, that's not what happened. But then we watched it a second time, and we realized, but the overarching message is correct. That Carole is a passionate advocate for a very worthwhile cause,
Mhm.
that we have a very supportive relationship, and that Joe is not a good guy.
No,
Yeah.
he's not. Never has been. I couldn't even watch Joe Exotic. I got to episode 3.
She tells
Couldn't watch
me,
anymore.
Linda, because we'd both said, I'm not interested in that. And then she's
The
like,
only reason we
people are
watched it is
asking us questions.
that's why. That's the
So
only
she's
reason we
like,
even
I
tried.
gotta watch it. I didn't make it through the first episode. I just couldn't. I just could not handle it.
Let me tell you one other thing that it's on Peacock as well. A film called The Conservation Game,
Right.
which was by Mike Weber, and that had a
Have
big
to watch.
impact on the bill because it exposed Jack Hanna. Jack Hanna, up until that time, even though he was retiring, had enormous influence at the Columbus Zoo. So the Columbus
Right.
Zoo was opposing our bill, and therefore Senator Portman would not support the bill. And it makes sense. Look, if you're sitting in his office, if the largest zoo in my state is against it,
I'm
well,
going to take them as an authority.
so the film comes out at the film festival.
Mhm.
I think it was the next day that Jack Hanna's family issues this press release saying, "Oh, his dementia progressed a little faster than we thought, and he won't be available for public appearances." Days later,
that's it.
the Columbus Zoo comes out reversing their position and supporting the bill. And about a week later, or 2 weeks, Senator Portman signs onto the bill. So
Wow.
It
that had
is
a
so
huge-
cool to see all the tiny little minutia that fall into place, like that movie
Yeah.
that makes that happen, that make the domino, right? We think we're not doing a lot, but every little thing we can do will affect, and we never know what the ripple effect will be.
We
You
feel
keep
that
talking
way
about these
working with little
things.
cats, so I can't imagine.
True. Yes, that this happened to fall into place. Yes.
Mhm.
It's crazy. And I have to say, you are not given enough credit. I just need to do a
Agreed.
shout out and
Agree.
a little praise for the Howard Baskin, because I recognized watching that movie. I recognize a lot of Carole. I am kind of known as the gutsy mouthy,
Who, you?
No,
No.
I'm shy and unassuming in all things. And when I'm passionate about something,
You better step aside because she's going to plow right
leave or
over
get
you.
run over. Exactly. And my husband is the strong, quiet managerial type, but I couldn't do it. I'm all the mouth, but I couldn't do anything without him in the background. He's in the background of so many things. He holds me up and he does so much silent work. We bring so many business decisions to him for our job. Nobody
do.
knows Brian's involved. And I know there is nothing in my mind that can imagine Carole would have made it through all these years without you, Howard.
I'm sure she wouldn't.
No,
Doing
I
this
agree.
alone would have been impossible.
I think she would agree with you. And,
But not only were you there to hold her up, you partook in her,
Yeah, you were active in it.
what
yeah.
she wanted to accomplish. You actually took a huge role in that.
well, look, I did not get married until I was 54. And at the point where I made that decision, I said, you know what, if I'm going to do this, then my number one goal is going to make this person happy. And it was very clear the best way to do that was to help with this mission. So I've said to people, I get a double benefit. I get to do something for the cats and make Carole happy. So
Do you have any brothers at home? I'm single.
Right.
we get asked that a lot. I do have a brother.
Is he married?
No, he's single. He's in Raleigh.
Oh,
and-
I'm in just outside Charlotte.
She's in Lancaster, South Carolina, just outside Charlotte. We'll talk after the podcast. Howard.
Well, and there were some times in Joe versus Carole where we would look at each other and say, how did they know that? And I got to give them credit. I think they must have listened to every interview we ever did.
Wow.
I'm sure they did.
And found everything. And then we would think, oh yeah, there was that interview that we did about couples who work together. And we talked about some of these more personal things.
I guarantee they had a staff sitting around with booted up laptops watching everything you ever said and did.
I'm sure they did.
That interview, kind of sadly, that interview was with Ann Hecht and her, I'm blanking on her name, and then of course she had that horrible accident after.
Yeah. Ellen DeGeneres. Yeah.
No, this was
after Ellen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so sad. Oh, yeah. Well, what you are doing is incredible. And people, you have Nest cams, I saw, so that we can still watch the animals from
I
far.
love that.
Yeah, if you go to bigcatrescue.org/cams, I think, you can see those. There are other legislative things that go on. Right now, the USDA has put out what's called a request for comment about handling animals, which would deal with other species that our bill doesn't cover. And the deadline is March 6th. So people can go to, again, bigcatrescue.org, but /cat laws, just cat laws.
Oh, I did look at that page.
Okay.
And you can send a
outs.
comment, and the comment we would ask you to send. Well, it's set up for you to send a comment, but
I signed
what
it.
we would like them to do is make a rule under the Animal Welfare Act that you can't touch any of these exotic animals.
Yes.
Does that, Howard, does that cover, people that have serval cats and other little big cats as pets? Or they kind of fly in between under the radar, don't they?
The bill does not, our bill, the Big Cat Public Safety Act does not, but the USDA regulations do.
Okay.
So what you have now is you have some people starting to use servals, to get around the law. I don't think that has the marketing appeal of a tiger cub,
right?
But it's the same miserable life for the servals that it would be for the tigers. So this is an opportunity to have this impact on these other species. So those would be two.
There was a town here in the Carolinas, I don't remember what it was, but somebody had one of those and it was illegal. So they were trying to get her to have to give the cat up. She ended up being able to keep the cat. I don't necessarily agree with that decision, but it is what it is.
So many things can happen. I really hit me hard. We remember the lady that had some sort of monkey, ape, gorilla, something, and it got loose and she called her friend.
It ripped her face
off. I mean, that got me. And I think partially because as a kid, I was obsessed with having a monkey for a pet, which my parents wouldn't allow, dog on them. But I didn't get my monkey, but I'm like, oh, that could happen. Right. Like lions,
people don't
tigers,
realize they're wild animals.
Yes.
Right. Well, what happens is you see Jack Hanna or Dave Salmoni or Boone Smith on TV with them on a leash and petting them. And they may sit there and say, oh, these shouldn't be pets, they're dangerous. But what you see has more impact than what you hear. To 100%. Me, it's a little bit like if I sat here smoking a cigarette saying, now smoking's bad for you, don't do that.
You should never smoke. Shame on you. It's
Gee, how did you know? No, never mind.
Well, and if you think about it, the real subliminal message is you shouldn't have one of these animals unless you're special like me. And we all want to be special.
Of course we do.
That's what encouraged. So the good news is after the conservation game came out, we have not seen a cub on any night show since then.
That's
and
good.
the dog shows.
You know what the other thing I was going to say, I was really impressed that Joe versus Carole used CGI and not real tigers.
She told me that before I watched it. It's CGI. Don't get upset. It's CGI. I'm like, okay, I had to keep reminding myself.
It was still heartbreaking, even knowing they weren't real, but I'm glad that they didn't use real tigers.
We were very pleased about that.
Yeah. I had to keep reminding myself. It was a beautiful job. It was very close, but yeah. I have to believe that people do not understand what goes into taking care of a big cat when they bring one home.
Honey, they don't understand what goes into taking care of a little
house cat. I know that's true. Yes. And we see that with Bengals. Bengals aren't exactly wild animals, but they're somewhere in between that house cat.
Well, they are. They're a hybrid between a wild animal and as you know, they breed them down through 5 generations. Well, what happens to the first 4 generations?
That's a good question.
And even at what they call F5, many of them don't work out. And we had one lady show up with a Savannah cat that the first 2 years, they're basically infants, they're manageable. Mm-hmm. And then they become aggressive. And she tried for 3 more years. She paid $15,000, I think, for this cat. Whoa. Set up a room in her house devoted to the cat because most of the time they won't use a litter box. And she showed up with scars up and down her arms from this cat that I just can't do it anymore. And and these places that breed them tend to be like what we think of as puppy mills, these horrible breeding.
Right.
It's not natural for a serval to breed with a domestic cat. Normally they would eat a domestic cat.
Right. Right. This is incredibly going against their nature. And it's so important when we work with our behavior work to look at outside and bring it inside and give them all of the enrichment that they would get outside. We tell everybody we're doing it wrong. Right.
Could you imagine tigerizing your house? How the heck would you
tiger-proof your house? Instead of catching their prey and eating it, we serve them a dish of dead critter and go here. And all the things that we do that are against their nature to meet the needs of a lion or a tiger. What does it even cost to feed a big cat on average?
That's a good question.
Well, a average tiger, they range in size, but they eat between 10 and 15 pounds a day.
Wow.
Some of them a little less. And I'm sorry, I'm dog sitting and
that's absolutely fine.
Okay, you can be a part of it. Okay.
Yes, of course.
You want to be on the
phone? Oh, pretty baby. Looks like my former.
You got soot right behind you.
I do.
Mine went away. They got tired of being on camera.
The other big issue is the one you were alluding to, which is in the wild, they would be constantly challenged.
Yeah.
And we spend an enormous amount of time doing what's called enrichment, trying to, we have an enrichment committee that meets every Wednesday, and they'll make out of boxes and paper things that the animal can't, hurt themselves with.
Right.
A mock warthog and put it in there and let the tiger tear it apart, or holiday themed like St. Patrick's Day or things like that. And it stimulates them. We sometimes have 2 larger enclosures that we call the vacation enclosures, and we rotate the tigers through the big one and the smaller cats through the small one, so they get a change of scenery, change of neighbors. We spend just a lot of time doing that. Well, you look at the conditions they live in. When somebody takes one home, they get told by some breeder that if you get it when it's a cub, it'll bond to you and be safe. They see Siegfried and Roy with a tiger on their sofa and think that they live with the tiger in the house, which is
exactly
ridiculous. They take those pictures and get that tiger the hell out of there as fast as they can before it craps all over the sofa. And so
imagine getting that behavior call.
Yes.
these animals end up in this tiny box with, it would be like locking you in your bathroom for your entire life.
Oh,
It would be like solitary confinement with nothing to do. And it's just psychologically, I mean, you can even see it on their faces, you know, the sad look when we get these animals out of there. And one of the most joyous moments are when we take these animals and put them into an enclosure. So many of them have never walked on grass.
that's just heartbreaking.
We got a circus tiger who, you know, had always been, he was from Peru. And when he walked out of the enclosure, out of the transport wagon, he put his foot down. It's like, what is that? And he started walking around and sniffing everything. And then that particular enclosure, there's an area of the lake that the tiger can swim up to.
Ooh.
Up to a barrier. And the first time he put his paw in, it's like, whoa, what's that? You know? And then a week later, he was swimming around like
a tiger who'd never touched water or grass. That is the saddest thing
my next question was going to be, how do you do environment enrichment for the big cats? But it sounds like that's what you do. You're giving them some natural environment, some water they can play in. How else do you keep them mentally stimulated, Howard?
We do operant conditioning. So there are certain behaviors we will try to train them for, not for any performance purpose, but for a medical purpose. So for instance, it's helpful to, until they get too old to do it, to train the tigers to come up like this. And then the vet can look in their mouth better, see their neck, see their paws. We train them to be able to take their tail out and give them injections, or while they're sitting by the side of the cage. We'll train them to show one paw or the other. And that entire process is also enrichment. We do a lot of things just with toilet paper tubes and bigger tubes for the big cats, with spices and perfumes, and particular spices and perfumes that
appeal to them.
To keep them interested. So there's just a whole bunch of those things that we do.
I put treats in toilet paper tubes and fold the edges on and hide them. And that's what I was saying with the enrichment, because I have 12 house cats, and every morning after I make the bed and I'm ready to sit down to work, I put their cat beds on the bed. I usually put their cat grass on, but I'm trying to let it grow a little because they mowed it to death.
I like it.
I often relax my cat on a television for them to watch. At night, I hide silver vine sticks and put treat balls out for them to do. And it's a lot.
I do this too. I'm 15. It's a lot.
And so now I'm imagining a lion or a tiger,
but enrichment
for them, because bored cats get into trouble and they get depressed and anxiety.
Right.
It's great.
Well, I'm impressed by everything you guys do. I hope you keep doing this awesome work. Any last words of wisdom for us, Howard, before we depart?
Well, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't suggest that if people want to help, they can go to our website and look for the donate button. So awesome. We appreciate that.
Yes.
So that's bigcatrescue.org. I'll be putting that website address and a few others in the comment section when we post the video on YouTube. Linda, any last questions for Howard?
Honey, I could keep Howard here for days, and I know. I'll stop.
I think we have enough here to cut 2 episodes.
I think honestly. We do. I'm very excited. Yes. Just so appreciative of you coming on, Howard. We were just so excited because this is great information and people need to know about this. And you and Carole have created a name that is recognizable for yourself in saving the big cats. So you hold a lot of clout, and when you speak, people listen. And so we appreciate that and furthering getting the word out.
Well, I'll tell you one last little anecdote related to that.
Yes.
We used to do an annual gala, and we would give an award to some animal hero, we would call it. And one year it was Bo Derek. And as we guided her off the stage, I had to be like one of the bodyguards in front. And people were crushing around us in this crowd of a few hundred people. And my thought at the time was, thank God we're not famous. It must be awful.
Ah! So you have to watch what you say because we're
Truth,
gonna show you.
truth. Suddenly you're representative.
You
Suddenly you
tempted
can't.
God.
Yes,
Well,
exactly.
They say the subconscious does not hear the negative, so don't
Right.
plan any negative thoughts.
That's right.
right,
I
well,
keep
Yes.
asking for the $1 million for our
I
sanctuary.
know it's
but
coming. It's coming. It's coming. We'll build our sanctuary. It'll get there. Smaller scale. Fortunately, less
Oh,
work.
there's going to be a
but
true sanctuary too.
Thank you
Yes.
both. This was fun.
Thank
was
you, Howard.
great.
We really appreciate you.
We're honored to have you on our show, Howard. Send our best to Carol.
Please.
Of course, I always have to thank my lovely co-host, Linda Hall, who adds the sparkle. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Mark Winter, who gave us this awesome spot on Pet Life Radio. Thank you so much for being our wonderful producer. Now, don't forget, everyone, every day is Catterday. And we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.